This week on Hometown Ghost Stories, the old Montana State Prison was active for over 100 years and saw some of the state's most violent criminals. Multiple riots, suicides, and murders at the prison have left its mark on the town of Deer Lodge, Montana. The prison is no longer actively housing inmates, but many believe it is one of the most active locations in the state for paranormal activity and may be one of the most haunted prisons in the country. This is Hometown Ghost Stories, the old Montana State Prison.
Hometown Ghost Stories contains serious and often distressing events and is not intended for all audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
It was a cold, soundless night, and the dank prison air hung stagnant in my cell as I lay awake. It wasn't like the fresh air that I had been used to before my imprisonment, the air that flowed freely through the brisk Montana valleys. It was a different entity entirely. It was dead air that seemed to emanate from the decaying stone walls like a disease. Another sleepless night. I asked myself what it was that gave me the looming sense of dread that plagued me each night, but the question was rhetorical in nature. As my mind began to wander, I contemplated the cruelty of my unfortunate existence, wrongly convicted and sentenced to 20 years in this house of sadness. Before my imprisonment, my experience was that each day, time seemed to tick by faster than the last. But in here, the minutes felt like hours. It's not merely a 20-year sentence if each day feels like a month. So I'll resign myself to isolation, and the indifferent world outside these bars will move on without me as I waste away in this rotten tomb of iron and stone. My thoughts were interrupted by a dragging sound that seemed to be coming from outside of my cell. It wasn't the first time I heard this sound. It would happen occasionally in the middle of the night, but I have yet to discover its source. I climbed out of my cot and cautiously approached the cell door as the sound grew louder. In prior experiences, the dragging sound would get closer and closer, but then suddenly stop before it, whatever it was, would come into view of my cell. I assumed tonight would be no different. Still, I waited by the door just in case. As the dragging sound drew closer, I instinctively took a step back. Something was different this time. I was unable to identify what exactly, but I could feel it. Whatever was making the sound had to be just out of view of my cell, but I feared that was about to change. Suddenly, something cold and damp struck me in the back. I quickly discovered it was the stone wall of my cell. For a second, I thought the walls were closing in on me, but I immediately realized that I had been subconsciously backing away from the cell door. It was almost pitch black, but I could barely make out the shape of something crawling into view on the other side of the bars of my cell. Fear tightened its icy grip around me, squeezing so tight that I was rendered immobile. The strange shape began to come into focus as my eyes adjusted. It looked like a long arm and hand, but it stretched too far to be human. The dragging sound stopped and was replaced by a choking sound as the figure began to rise. It moved unnaturally. It was dark and shadowy as it grew to a mass of twisted darkness and stood over 7 feet tall. The choking sound grew louder to a croaking growl, and I let out a scream that tore through the quiet prison like a riot siren. I squeezed my eyes shut and kept screaming as I heard the guards shouting for me to be quiet. I ignored them. My life, which has recently seemed worthless, suddenly became invaluable in the face of death. I heard the guards marching down the hall, and I heard the lights switch on. I opened my eyes, and the figure was gone, replaced by the angry faces of the guards who were demanding an explanation. I knew I couldn't give them one. Nobody would ever believe me, so I kept it to myself. But I knew what I saw was real, and I knew that I hadn't seen the last of it. I'm Jesse Wilkins, and this is Hometown Ghost Stories, the old Montana State Prison. For over 100 years, the old Montana State Prison in Deer Lodge, Montana, housed some of the state's worst offenders in an attempt to tame the Wild West. The new territory of Montana, created in 1864, had no prison during the Civil War and Gold Rush days. Federal prisoners convicted of violating the laws of Congress were sent under contract to the Nebraska State Penitentiary. Those who were convicted of violating territorial laws were sent to county jails, mostly in Madison County. Territorial Governor James M. Ashley was determined to have a prison built in Montana. On January 22, 1867, Congress appropriated no more than $40,000 to erect a prison in Montana Territory at a site selected by the legislature. They originally chose Algenta as the site for the prison, but were overruled by the territorial governor, and they settled on Deer Lodge as the location for their prison. With only a $40,000 budget, they immediately had to ditch their original plans and settle on cheaper options. This reduced their original design from a central building in the north and south cell wings to a single wing, made out of granite instead of cement, which was the cheaper option. By 1870, the left wing was complete, and in 1873, ownership was transferred from the U.S. Attorney General's office to the territory of Montana. Quote, "From the very beginning, it was apparent that the new wing failed to satisfy even minimal expectations. The finished wing entailed nothing but bare walls, roof, floor, 14 brick cells, 6 by 8 feet, with nothing between them and the roof, and only gratings for the lower windows." Territorial Governor Benjamin Potts bemoaned the prison's unfinished condition, maintaining that to complete the structure required at least an additional $4,500. By the 1880s, the prison was already overcrowded, and it became clear that they needed to expand to add more cells. In 1884, an additional $15,000 was appropriated to complete the unfinished portions of the prison. They found that the east and west walls of the existing facility had no stone foundations and extended only 18 inches into the ground, composed of soggy brick, which would be unable to support additional weight. Instead of adding new cells, they used the money to build a central office building with guard dormitories. The following year, an additional $25,000 was appropriated for the completion of the south wing. This was a 3-storied brick cell house containing a 3-tier block of brick cells. This added 42 new cells, which increased the facility's overall inmate capacity by 84. In 1889, Montana became the 41st state and assumed ownership of the prison, which it could not afford to operate, never mind modernize or renovate. The iconic look of the prison comes from the turn of the century when Frank Conley became warden. Conley was convinced that the best way to keep prisoners from rioting was to keep them busy with hard manual labor. They began with the perimeter wall, using local sandstone that the inmates quarried and shaped. The 20-foot walls extended an additional 4 feet underground and gives the prison the look of a medieval castle. Conley added to the prison with the addition of Cell Block 1 in 1912. The brick and sandstone building also featured a battlement-style roof and towers as well as arched windows. The prison once again became overcrowded, housing 198 inmates. The conditions were harsh, and it was increasing in population. With no room left in the cells, inmates were being housed in outbuildings in the prison yard, the wash house, storehouse, and carpenter shop. There was also a lack of security fence. Warden Conley began an extensive renovation on the security fence and constructed a log cell house, which could house an additional 80 inmates. By contracting inmates for construction projects throughout the entire state, Conley provided income to run the prison and alleviated the overcrowded conditions by housing inmates at the various job sites. The prison crews would end up building 500 miles of road around Flathead Lake, most of the roads around Deer Lodge, McDonald Pass, and many other roads in various other counties throughout the entire state of Montana. Inmates built 11 buildings at Warm Springs, Montana State Hospital, and 4 more buildings at the Montana Tuberculosis Sanitarium, known as Gallon. Inmates also operated 11 ranches owned by Conley, and he provided inmates to work at local farms and ranches. By 1916, about half of the old Montana State Prison inmates worked and lived outside the walls of the prison. The cell house was constructed by convicts in just 11 months, and it was a model facility in its day. Every cell had running water, flushing toilets, and good ventilation. The cell house had 8 galleys, 4 per side. Each one contained 25 new cells. The design was influenced by the Auburn system of prison administration, which was based on the idea of solitary confinement at night and hard work during the day. They also enforced a strict policy of silence at all times. Eventually, the prison would again be overcrowded, where they would have to house 2 inmates per cell. These people were not allowed to talk during meals, they were not allowed to talk during work, and were even ordered not to speak to each other from cell to cell. The warden's office was located across the street from the prison for security reasons. The 1908 prison escape attempt left Deputy John A. Robinson dead and Warden Conley severely wounded. Conley held what was called Warden's Court each morning, where the inmates could air their grievances. Conley was a big man, over 300 pounds, and could hold his own. And what he couldn't handle, the .41 caliber pistol that he carried, would. On the morning of March 8th, Deputy John A. Robinson brought in some inmates to speak with the warden when he was rushed by 4 men, W.A. Hayes, C.B. Young, Orem Stevens, and George Rock. Hayes managed to get past Robinson and burst into Conley's office. He was waving a knife and threatening the warden. Conley drew his pistol and fired twice. He hit Hayes in the ear. The remaining 3 inmates then rushed in, and Conley fired again. He hit George Rock, causing him to flee from the office. As Hayes got back to his feet, Conley shot him again and threw him into the hall after Rock. Conley then went to help Robinson, who had been tackled to the ground. Unfortunately for Robinson, his throat had already been slashed by Rock, and he was stabbing him when Conley threw a chair at the assailant. The man then turned on Conley. The warden fought him off, but his gun was now empty, and the escape attempt ended when backup arrived. Deputy Robinson had been killed, and it took 103 stitches to stabilize Warden Conley. One of the slashes from Rock's blade was just 1/8 of an inch from severing the warden's jugular vein. None of the rioters had died, and Conley made sure that they were healed up before they were brought up on charges. Rock and Hayes were both given the death sentence. Stevens won his acquittal and would end up only serving his original sentence, and Young's sentence was extended to life in prison. Conley oversaw the executions of Rock on June 16, 1908, and Hayes on April 2nd of 1909. Rock and Hayes were the only 2 men to be executed within the prison walls. Female inmates were held on the 3rd floor of the cell block. While over 290 men were incarcerated at this point, fewer than 10 women were held at the prison at a time. They were arguably treated worse. They were offered no work or education and forced into cramped quarters. Today, many visitors report hearing the ghostly cries of these women when visiting the 3rd floor, and evidence captured by paranormal investigators have led them to believe that at least one of these ghosts goes by the name of Nancy. Motion detectors have captured evidence of what seems to be something unseen walking up and down the hallway of the women's cell unit. In the late 1950s, the Montana Council on Corrections decided that in order to modernize the facility, the new warden would be selected from a nationwide search. Floyd Powell of Wisconsin was selected as the next warden and took control of the prison in August of 1958. In 1959, a riot would break out, which would have the prison and the town of Deer Lodge on edge for 36 hours. The riot started on April 16th and was the longest and bloodiest riot at the facility. Instigated by inmates Jerry Miles and Lee Smart, who demanded better conditions, the riot would claim the lives of 3 people. The warden was held hostage, and the deputy warden was murdered. The inmates took control of the facility, locking 26 guards in the hole before it ended in the early hours of April 18th, when the National Guard was called in and stormed the facility. Miles and Lee fled to a tower with 2 stolen rifles. They ended their lives in a murder-suicide in what is now known as the Death Tower. Today, the tower still stands and is said to be haunted by the ghosts of Miles and Lee. Footsteps and strange noises are frequently reported inside the tower, as well as orbs being captured on camera and video, and people experiencing cold spots. The cell block is said to be one of the most haunted locations in the prison. Home to thousands of inmates over its decades of operation, the building saw no shortage of violence, mistreatment, and despair. Cell Block 1912 is said to have extreme paranormal activity. It was home to a man named Stanley Dean Baker, convicted of killing a man and eating his heart. When arrested, he had a leather pouch around his neck which contained his victim's fingers. While in prison, he was known to be a Satan worshiper. Today, visitors to his cell report having extreme amounts of anxiety, some even leading to panic attacks. They report heaviness in the chest and claim that there seems to be a force field of energy in his cell. Visitors and paranormal investigators have also felt the presence and communicated with the ghost of a man known as Turkey Pete. Turkey Pete was a model prisoner who earned his nickname because he tended to the prison's turkeys. As he grew older, he developed dementia and considered himself an entrepreneur, which guards and other inmates entertained. They would buy the turkeys off him for 25 cents per bird. After 50 years in prison, he died at the age of 89 and was the only prisoner known to have his funeral held on the prison grounds. The prison closed its doors for good in 1979, and about 1 year later, opened to the public as a museum. They offer historical tours as well as paranormal investigations. So much paranormal activity has occurred at the old Montana prison that several ghost hunting TV shows have traveled there to investigate and film shows. In 2010, Ghost Lab visited the prison to investigate. They experienced everything from mysterious whispers, the sound of footsteps in empty rooms and hallways, and even witnessed objects flying through the air. They also claimed that there was the unmistakable feeling that they were being watched at all times. They also felt a sense of dread while in the prison. Other visitors claimed to hear the sound of cards shuffling, as well as muffled voices and footsteps. Some even claimed to hear the sound of inmates arguing, echoing down the vacant hallways and empty cells. Museum director Julia Brewer is very familiar with the seemingly endless unexplained activity on the grounds. She claims that she has smelled burning flesh in her office for nearly 10 years. Several ghosts are said to haunt the museum gift shop, including what many believe could be the spirit of a former inmate named Calvin, who was beaten to death in the corner of the room when it was an industrial area of the prison. Another ghost has earned the nickname of the Stinker, and his spirit is known as more of a prankster who likes to move merchandise around the gift shop. Just outside the gift shop is the Montana Auto Museum, which is haunted by several ghostly figures who have been seen, and several visitors claim to hear the sound of car doors slamming when there's nobody getting in or out of any cars. It's also believed that the Auto Museum has the spirit of a young girl. During a ghost tour, the guide asked any spirits in the area to turn on a flashlight, and she did just that. They followed this up by asking her to move a chain that was cordoning off the cars. She did that as well. While many of the ghosts that haunt the old Montana State Prison seem to be playful or pranksters, tour guides warn paranormal enthusiasts that some of these ghosts have a much darker energy, allegedly choking and scratching guests, and have even been known to follow some unlucky visitors home. I'm Jesse Wilkins, and this is Hometown Ghost Stories, the old Montana State Prison. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome into Hometown Ghost Stories, episode number 118, heading back to Montana for the first time since episode 66. I'm Jesse Wilkins. I'm joined by Rob Coakley. Hello, Rob.
Jesse, I want you to think about being in Montana, and you've committed a crime so heinous that you're going to get the death penalty. And at your sentencing, when they tell you that you're going to die, they say, "We are going to erect some wood and kill you with the jerk-up method."
That's how I'd want to go.
That's how you have to go, right? Like, that's the way to go.
Absolutely. We're also joined by Dave Wilkins. Hello, Dave.
Hello. Nice job on that.
Thank you. Thank you. So there's a lot more at this prison, and we'll go over that obviously in this part of the show. But this is the old Montana State Prison, one of the more haunted prisons in the country. A lot of hauntings here. I mean, anytime you have a prison, you're obviously going to have a ton of violence, a ton of emotions, a ton of ups and downs, just everything that's these things can just get soaked into the walls of a place like this, and murders, suicides, riots, just all sorts of stuff up and down. I mean, obviously across the country, you can have all sorts of this kind of stuff at any given prison, but this one has it has it all. It has it all. And it had a lot of stories that reminded me a lot of Alcatraz, but it has its cast of characters, man. There's a lot to talk about.
Speaking of cast of characters, this is the first haunted prison that we've covered that doesn't actually have Al Capone haunting it.
that we know of.
I came across nothing about Al Capone in this story, but he did get mentioned. Speaking of mentions, let's mention quickly that Jeannie R just gifted 10 Hometown Ghost Stories memberships on YouTube. We also got, before the live portion of the show even started, Ryan P gifted 10 and Matthew T gifted 10. So thank you all so much for your generosity. And this actually should be, if all things go swimmingly, if nobody's internet just absolutely completely cuts out and we got to chop up the episode a million times, if everything goes swimmingly, this should be our first ever video episode on Spotify. So this is something new. So if you're a Spotify listener, it should play just like any other video podcast out there that you watch. It's kind of a new thing with Spotify, and we were able to apparently do this. So we're going to give it a go. We're going to see how it goes. For Spotify listeners, you should be able to witness the episode. A lot of people, they just do the audio version, and we appreciate every listener. But now for Spotify listeners, you're going to be able to also watch. So wait till you get home. Don't do it in the car, but you can now do that. So you can play videos on Spotify. So if you ever tuned into the only one that I've seen that automatically plays video for me was like Joe Rogan's podcast for a while. So they were like, what's the next biggest podcast? And they're like, oh, yeah. It's Hometown Ghost Stories. So we're next, it's going to be good.
Of course.
Yeah. If things go swimmingly, it should automatically be a video tomorrow, but who knows? So that's that. Anything else we want to touch on before we hop into this?
No, let's start talking about this haunted prison.
Yeah.
Let's thank who we dedicated this show to, which is Kate and Steve.
Kate and Steve M. Yeah, I meant to reach out to you guys to make sure that we hadn't already dedicated an episode to Kate and Steve M. But if we have, then boom, you get your second dedicated episodes to Kate and Steve M. But I don't think we had done that yet. But Absolute Legends, VIP patrons, if you want an episode dedicated to you, then consider becoming a member of the VIP on Patreon. So Dave is gone, so let's enjoy this while it lasts, and he's back. All right. So
sorry, my cat was knocking at the door to leave.
Yes, this happens more often than you could ever imagine. So I think we start with Turkey Pete. Let's talk about Turkey Pete. It seems like a nice story. It's a fun one. I was like, Turkey Pete, and the story is kind of adorable. I mean, he was a model prisoner, so he certainly turned his life around. Let's not forget that he was sent to jail for murdering 2 people. So there's a reason he's there. But this man, he
great guy.
Great prisoner, model prisoner, never did anything wrong. And it seemed like he was kind of a sweet old man, and maybe he was remorseful, and maybe the prison system.
Are you sure he murdered 2 people? I'm seeing 1 person.
Okay, Turkey Pete murdered at least 1 person.
It was a crime of passion, though. He was living in a boarding house in 1918, and there was this woman there that he really liked, and her name was Melanie. And one day, Melanie was talking to someone else, and Pete didn't like that, so he shot him with a 38.
Well, now that you mention that, it's perfectly fine.
Yeah, totally understandable.
Why was he even in jail?
I know.
So this is the story of Turkey Pete. So basically, in his old age, he was tending to the turkeys, and then he developed dementia. Kind of a sad story, but everyone was just so cool with Turkey Pete because he was just such a nice guy in prison, other than the whole murder thing. But once he was there, he was a good guy, and he had this kind of delusion that, for one, he decided he was going to start selling the turkeys to people, which you just can't do. He's just tending to the turkeys, not his turkeys. So he started, quote unquote, selling them for 25 cents a piece. And the guards and the inmates played along with it. They were drawing up these gift certificates or bonds or whatever.
They're checks. They were essentially checks.
Okay, checks.
Yeah.
We like to say gift certificates because that's more fun, right? And
yeah, here's your old Montana State gift certificate.
Well, the prison promoted him, right? They gave him a promotion. And they said, you are now in charge of the prison treasury. So he was writing checks. He wrote a check for $12.5 billion to Brazil when the coffee crop failed. And he sent the president a check for the entire defense budget one year. And everyone just played along. They're like, yep, we got it. We're going to send that out for you, Pete. But he actually served 49 years of his 40-year prison sentence, because once his prison sentence was over, they realized this guy is not going to function well in society because he's completely lost his mind. So they actually just let him live at the prison, not in a cell, but he had a room there and whatnot. And they just kind of let him live out his life there because he liked it there. He was happy.
Yeah, kind of like a Shawshank situation. What was the old guy in Shawshank? Do you remember his name?
Morgan Freeman's character. Oh, no.
No, Morgan Freeman. But the old guy, he left and he ended up hanging himself because he
Brooks, maybe. It might have been Brooks.
Yeah, I think you're right. So that seems kind of like the same situation, but instead they left him there. And after he left, I had heard that they converted his cell into like a barber shop. Now, I don't think they like added a bunch of chairs and mirrors and the spinny blue and red thing outside, but I think they just used his cell as a barber shop. But if you go to the prison now, they've made like a dummy of him, and there's like a painting up on the wall of him when he was young and him when he was old. And people leave money on the bed for, I don't know, for good luck or whatever, but kind of cool,
Jesse.
Jesus, for the turkeys. Oh, maybe they're buying the turkeys. Yeah. So there we go.
You leave a quarter on the bed, you buy a turkey.
That was what he was charging.
You're all set for Thanksgiving at that point.
Exactly. So it was like 25 cents a piece. That's what he was doing. But people have communicated with, so now his ghost, I couldn't find too many hauntings on him, but the legend of Turkey Pete is all over the place. Institutionalized is the word for what we're talking about there. Thank you, Brodad. But the hauntings, I mean, people do get like some spirit box communications. I think people have felt his presence there, but the hauntings, I didn't find too many accounts of hauntings tied to Turkey Pete. So that's why I kind of wanted to mention it and kind of move on from good old Turkey Pete there. But it's kind of
it might be people trying to find a positive presence within a space that a lot of the hauntings are so negative. So they're just grasping towards what is the most positive experience that this prison actually ever had. And by all accounts, it was Turkey Pete.
Exactly. Dave, you're about to say something 6 times in a row while Rob was trying to say something.
I don't remember what I was trying to say.
Good.
Okay.
We'll go.
Gotcha.
On.
Yeah. So there's plenty to see at this prison there, and there's all sorts of hauntings, right? And for some reason we have the haunting of like a little girl, or what they believe is a little girl in the auto museum, which that doesn't really add up to me. Why would there be a little girl there? Again, we don't make the rules. Who knows? It could have been something residual of maybe someone's daughter who kept visiting them in prison or something like that. And then now she haunts the place. I don't know. But they do believe that there's like a playful little girl spirit that haunts the museum. And then there's kind of a darker one as well of this guy who, back when it was an industrial area, there was a man who was murdered in that room. So that was another thing that we kind of didn't really mention too much in the episode was it's prison. So you have a lot of violence, a lot of prisoner on prisoner murders, a lot of suicides that happened here. It's just not all of this is extremely well documented. The riots obviously are, and other cases that happen inside the prison are. So we kind of mentioned what was really, really on the books. But if you talk to guards and if you listen to people that work there and different inmates that serve time there that are still alive, they will mention all of the death that they saw at this place. So it's definitely there's definitely no shortage of reasons for a building like this to be unbelievably haunted, which it seems like there is.
Yeah. And it's also a prison is a lot like a house in the sense that we get a lot of residual hauntings in houses because of how much time people spent there. Well, guess where people spend even more time? Prison, because they're not allowed to go anywhere. So all the residual hauntings you're going to get on top of all of the like extreme energy hauntings in a prison, it's just like this giant, recipe for every type of different haunting you could have between the negative energy, the residual hauntings. It runs the smorgasbord of everything in terms of hauntings. If
you saw how little I actually left my house, or how little I leave my house in my free time, you'd think I was in prison. When I die, my ghost is going to haunt this house, and it's just going to be me swearing at video editing software. And that's gonna be it. I was losing my mind today at I think I need a new mouse. Like my mouse, the clicking isn't like holding, and I'm sitting here, I'm just losing my mind trying to edit audio. And the wife's in the other room. She's like, "Is everything okay?" I'm like, "No, it's not okay."
See, I thought it would be you just walking around your house getting upset that all your windows are different sizes. Just like, why couldn't they just be the same size in this house?
Yeah, that's true. Old houses, man. No door or window is the same size. But yeah. So like we said, there's just so many different reasons for this to be a haunted prison, and they still have this kind of portable gallows that they have now. As far as I read, according to the never wrong source of Wikipedia, the only two executions that happened here were the 2 prisoners that were involved in the Death Tower riot of 1959. Right. Now, that doesn't mean that they're the only 2.
Sounds like there was more executions performed by the prisoners than there were in the prison.
Right. So plenty of people died here, but I think those are the only 2 official executions that happened on the prison grounds. So I don't know if they were doing executions somewhere else or what even are the laws of the death sentence in Montana. I didn't look into that, but that was obviously there had to be some sort of death penalty because they were like, wow, these guys just killed the deputy warden, tried to break out of prison. They're getting hanged on the spot.
Well, they didn't get hanged. They were the ones who got the jerk up method that I was making fun of earlier.
Tell me about this method.
So the jerk up method, which is just a pleasure to say every single time. Basically, there was some sort of weight. And what they would do instead of like dropping them to hang them, they would drop like a 300-pound weight that lifted the body up. And that was supposed to snap the neck on the way up. But for both of these prisoners, that didn't happen. They actually got pulled up after the weight dropped, and they just had to wait until they were strangled to death while they were hung up in the air.
Yeah,
so the jerk up method didn't work so well.
Right. It's supposed to be a more humane method of hanging somebody rather than letting them strangle slowly. But capital punishment is still the penalty in the state of Montana to this day, but they haven't used it since 1996.
Okay. All right. So thank you for clarifying. And anyways, so they still have this jerk up machine in the, it's now parked in the old theater. And it's a very creepy looking theater. Anytime we have a theater, we talk about theaters being haunted. This one probably haunted. It's in a very haunted place. So most likely just another haunted theater that we're covering here on Hometown Ghost Stories. But the last I saw of it, it was placed right in there. They still got the original one that they used. And I saw some serious investigation footage where they caught some really cool evidence on the Ovilus. I think it was the Ovilus 3 at the time. And some crazy communications from what it sounded like was the 2 escape guys. So it was Lee and was it Smart? I think the two prisoners in the escape attempt. So it seems like if that's the case, because this is in the theater, this isn't in the Death Tower. Now in the Death Tower, they have multiple people that have reported hearing. They're sensing their presence inside that tower, different kind of communications. You've had a ton of paranormal investigations here. It's one of these locations, thank God, that is open to doing paranormal tours and paranormal investigations. So it's a place that we can absolutely add to the list as a possibility of places that we could do a live investigation from, which I'd be super pumped about. I think the top of my list is going to be it's going to be a prison. Like this is like my dream, is to go investigate some big, cool old prison. Alcatraz, give me Brushy Mountain, give me this one. Give me any prison that's abandoned and haunted, and I'm in. As long as we don't have to break in and break the law. If it's a place that allows paranormal investigations, I would love to do that.
Listen, if I can go jerk up in a theater, then we're all set. So
how weird would it be to get arrested and get sent to a different jail for breaking into a jail? Right? I don't want to do that. That's just too weird. It's too backwards, right?
Yeah.
So
your punishment is they just ban you from all prisons. You're sentenced to never going to jail.
Like, go back to up. They're like, you're going straight back to your office and you're editing audio today. God damn it. With a bad mouse. That'd be my punishment.
We're not replacing the batteries.
So anyways, that's the theater and the little gallows that they have here. But the Death Tower is pretty cool. And you can go up to the exact room that these 2 guys shot themselves in. And it seems like it was a murder-suicide. That's what they believe. Either that or they both shot themselves or shot each other or whatever. But
I heard murder-suicide as well. It seems to be the common theory.
Right. But you can actually still see the damage on the side of the building, right outside the room that they died. When the National Guard rolled in, they shot a freaking bazooka at the wall or like at the tower to try to take them out. And you could actually still see the damage from that blast. It's pretty cool because they never patched it up. It looks like they did a little bit of work to kind of make sure that the thing didn't fall apart or the window didn't fall in, but that damage is still there. And when I first started doing research on it, mind you, this is 1959. When I first did research on it, they were like, you could still see the damage from the cannonball. I'm like, whoa, that's cool. And I'm thinking about it. And I'm like, were they rolling out cannons in 1959 to handle unruly prisoners? I don't think so. And then I did a little more research, and it was definitely a bazooka. And they still have, actually, in the museum, they have, I think, the actual bazooka. I showed it briefly in the video portion of this that they used in that attack. But rolling out a cannon in 1959, like, would you roll it out of the museum itself? Definitely a guy in a pirate hat, right?
Absolutely.
Did you hear about the story of the guard going up the tower after the events were done, and they were both dead up on top of the tower, and they were going to either capture them or retrieve their bodies? About the guard that slipped?
No, tell me about that.
So a guard on his way up slipped on his way up to get the people, and he looked down and he grabbed what he slipped on and he put it in his pocket. And 60 years later, he went back to the prison and said to the director of the now museum, he said, "I took this when I was at the site of the riot 60 years ago. I put it in my pocket and I went home, but I think the museum should have it." It was, any guesses what it was that he slipped on?
A banana peel.
Body part.
That'd be great. Good call, Jesse. It was Jerry Miles's jaw, if I remember correctly. He was walking up the stairs and slipped on his jaw, and he was like, "Oh, you know what I need? This extra jaw that's just on the ground here. That's the memento I need to keep at my house, is this dude's jaw."
Isn't it a little weird that we've seen this in quite a few cases? I think it was Velisca, where someone came in and just grabbed a piece of one of the victim's skulls and was like, "Gotta keep this," and he like displayed it in his store or something after.
Yeah, his pool hall, I believe. He was just like, yeah, just take, souvenirs. They did it for a lot of like criminals when they would just like parade the bodies through. It's just, I don't understand.
Yeah, actually, if we go back to like one of our first episodes, Edinburgh, they have the whole skeleton of Burke. I think it's either Burke or Hare, one of the serial killers, just on display in a window.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, but still, like something seems a little bit more dark about just having a piece of a skull, especially when it's the victim. If it's the serial killer, that's kind of cool. Yeah, chop them up, send them around, put them in gift shops, put them on display. Who cares? But when it's a victim, it's like, dude, put as much of him back together and bury that body whole. Kind of goes back to the whole desecration of grave thing. But we could probably talk to the guy from eBay and see what kind of body parts he's got stored.
The corpse bride as well over down in Florida, when they displayed her body again for particularly no reason after they found her laying in the guy's bed. Why would we display the body again at that point? So yeah, it seems to come up over and over and over again.
Absolutely. So then you have the women's area. So this is on the 3rd floor, I believe, of the cell house. And this area is supposed to be haunted, and they hear women crying a lot. They hear they've had motion sensors that have picked up on what seems like ghosts walking around these hallways, moving up and down. And then I was listening to an interview with a woman who worked at the prison, and I think she works in the museum now, or at least she did when this interview was taped. And she said that when she was up there, she had heard a woman scream help, to a point where everyone's like, "Oh, someone needs help," and they all started looking around because everybody heard it. And they said it was unbelievably ear-piercingly loud, and there was nobody there that could have screamed that. So that's a very chilling haunting there. And there's so few women at a time that stayed here. It seems like all of them are haunting. So, I mean, I guess you have to look into which of the women maybe died there, or, again, they don't have to die there to be haunting the place, but it's pretty crazy. Pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah, and there's a name that's often called out in the woman's room as well. I can't remember it offhand.
I think it's Nancy.
Yes, Nancy, that's the one. So they hear that name just like being called out quite frequently within there as well. So that's another. A lot of the hauntings make it feel like somebody's there with you, right? To the point that you're not scared at first, because it's a lot of yelling and footsteps like right down the hallway, echoing, to the point where you're like, it doesn't feel ominous at first from everything I'm reading. It's like, oh, this person must be back here, or this person must have said something. And then once you start looking around and either seeing nobody or, trying to reach out to the people that you know are there. They're like, yeah, we weren't over there. And then you kind of get that feeling a little bit afterwards, more so than when you're in a place that places we've been to and getting that pit in your stomach and that feeling that we always talk about. It seems like people don't really say that here. They don't think they're alone, and then they're just all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, there's actually something else here.
Right. Well, you get a little bit of everything here because it seems like, I mean, there's so many people that came through here. It was open for so long, and there was so much death and violence, like we mentioned earlier. So many things happened at this prison that you have like a whole charcuterie board of hauntings here. There's just a little bit of everything. So you get your playful spirits. You definitely have a ton of residual hauntings here where you're hearing noises. It sounds like it's just the everyday activities that would be happening in a prison. They seem to be replaying. And there's just so much raw emotion, like I said, that just could get soaked into the walls here that you go back to, I don't think we've ever mentioned on the show, the stone tape theory. And all of these things seem to be replaying. But then you have something dark here too. So you have all the things that we just mentioned. You have playful spirits, prankster spirits, apparently the spirit of a little girl, at least one of them, all these residual hauntings. And then there seems to be something darker as well, and something powerful as well.
The spirit of the little girl could be tied to the dark entity if it is demonic, because we know that demonic spirits do attempt to disguise themselves as children to trick people.
So what a weird place to do that, though.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, you guess it's a prison. Like, you know what? I'm going to fool them. I'm going to act like a little girl in a place that has only been ever full of adults.
Right, but I mean, you can't rule out that kids have been there. And you don't know. You don't know. Some sort of tragedy could have happened with the kid there. But I understand what you're saying.
It could have been a kid who visited a parent that was locked up in there, and therefore there's a lot of emotion tied to that location for that child. So that could be a reason. And I think that people aren't trying to, if you're a demonic spirit, you're not worried about what people are thinking logically. You're just trying to appeal to their emotion by appearing as a child. And most people who see a child spirit would
I can't believe it. I can't believe that you would think that demons only have level 1 thinking skills.
I think that's what you're implying.
No, that's what you're implying. You don't think that they can deduce like a well thought out plan? I'm ashamed of you.
While we're on the subject of demons, so there is, I'm not saying there's definitely something demonic here, but there's definitely something evil and powerful here. And there's a lot of weird things that are tied to this. Number one, you had that cannibal murderer, and this guy, he was also a Satan worshiper. I briefly mentioned it, but it was to a point where he wouldn't even speak to the guards unless they brought him chicken bones. And he would cast the chicken bones on the ground and whatever kind of dark magic he was doing. And then those would dictate how he was going to speak to the guards. So it wasn't just like he drew a pentagram on the wall and everyone's like, oh, he must be a Satan worshiper. It wasn't satanic panic kind of stuff. Like, he was a legitimate cannibal Satan worshiper. And when he murdered this poor guy, he ate his heart. He admitted it. He's like, I don't know what to do. I ate his heart. And they're like, because he dismembered the body. And they asked what he was doing with the different pieces or whatever. And they're like, well, where's the heart? He's like, oh, I ate it raw.
So, you can say it's a matter of fact.
I don't know why it makes it worse, but it definitely makes it worse. This is some Dothraki initiation for the next Khaleesi type stuff. Like, if they just cooked it up, maybe eating the heart would have been okay. Not a human heart, though. Or a horse heart. I'm not interested in eating any hearts, I don't think.
You know what it was? He probably just got one of those like Facebook checklists. It's like, add a point for everything you've done. And he saw eat a human heart on there. He's like, shit, that was the only one I didn't have. I got to go do that right now so I can have the perfect score on this Facebook. That's what Facebook does to people. Don't be on Facebook.
Brennan asks if the guy was in a black metal band. So the killer actually admitted later that he was not, that the killing had nothing to do with Satanism, that he was just high on LSD. And that's what the motive behind the killing was, because it was a completely random killing.
Yeah, LSD, man. That'll do some things to you. Well, including make you eat a human heart. The best was, the human heart thing's like crazy, but just the fact that he kept the guy's fingers in a little bag, around his neck is even more unsettling.
Yeah, it's a really bizarre detail to that story. Really gets your attention, though.
Yeah, good for him.
That's what he was going for. Yeah,
might have been.
Yeah.
You never know.
He only served 15 years and they let him out.
Really? Oh,
Yeah, he committed the crime in 1970. He served his prison sentence there until the prison closed 9 years later. Then he was transferred and he was released in 1985.
Well, they figure that when you're in Montana, after you get out for 15 years, it's going to be at least 20 years before you come in contact with another human being.
you're just roaming, just trying to find civilization for that long. Yeah, they should have just hung that guy as well. That's just not something that is cool. So another story that happened here.
The question before we move off of this is, they have the death penalty. What do you have to do to get the death penalty in Montana? Like, how does that not constitute?
Yeah, they're like, well,
punishment?
We don't have the whole body. And they're like, well, that's because he ate some of it. And like, but it's not a whole body, so no death penalty. I don't know. The biggest question is, was he able to keep the necklace?
Did he get to keep?
I think that's a question on all of our mind.
Probably.
Well, like they just left it in like the little manila envelope, and as he's leaving prison, they hand it back to him.
Here's your necklace. Yeah. One watch, one pair of shoes, $13 in the wallet, one leather pouch of human fingers.
Hey, there's only 9 in here.
And a half-eaten human heart. Yeah, okay, here you go. On your way, sir. But
one analog watch, one digital.
So, that being said, that's just another tie to something potentially satanic and demonic here, right? And then if you go through these cells, you can still see the drawings that were made by the inmates, and a lot of these are demonic-looking images, which is kind of creepy. And you have these faces of the devil drawn on several different cells, and you have to wonder if maybe some of it might be vandalism, but it looks like it's been there a while, so it could very well be something from inmates, and you have to wonder if there was other inmates that were also doing something demonic, and what can that conjure up? It's a dangerous road to travel down, for sure.
Definitely.
So that's mostly on the 3rd floor of the cell block. It seems like this is the higher up you go, it seems like the uneasiness builds, and people get more anxious. People are having panic attacks the higher up they go. And I don't think it's a thin air thing. I think it's something to do with the location. It has to do with the evil that was happening as you go up. But that seems to be the case. And then you have a whole other case, and I didn't mention this. I also didn't mention the tunnels underneath, which are supposed to be haunted as well. There's another tunnel system, and this is one where people catch a lot of evidence. So that's one. And then you also have the hole. So they have the hole where obviously as a prisoner, you get sent to the hole when you do something poor. But they had this guy, it was on Halloween 1966, this guy, Larry Cheadle, he volunteered to go into the hole. And then 8 hours later, he was found dead because apparently it was so hot in there that he cooked to death.
Oh.
Just in 8 hours. And why did he volunteer to go there? Now you have to wonder, I mean, it's prison. Maybe he was getting threatened by somebody and felt safer in the hole in solitary or whatever. But I mean, this guy, I guess it was so hot. I don't know why it was so hot on Halloween night, but it's kind of a creepy story. But now that's another hotspot for paranormal activity at the prison.
Literally, I guess.
Weirdly, no pun intended there.
Weirdly, though, I think that his like death certificate said that it was a heart attack. And they were like, well, it was a heart attack, but he was like cooked. And you're like, that's not what heart attacks do. Heart attacks don't cook your body. So I just don't think they knew what to put on the death certificate, or were just looking to get away from liability purposes.
I'm going to assume the latter there.
Yeah. He was cooked in the dark. I don't know. That's something I think if I were in prison, I would not volunteer to do. It's just, throw me in the hole for 8 hours. I want to be in pitch darkness and go insane.
Yeah, I think a theory that he was probably felt his life was threatened by another prisoner, so he volunteered. That's the only reason I can imagine, unless somebody dared him and he was like, I'll do it. I'm not scared.
Yeah, I would assume it's something. There's no way. I mean, maybe you're in prison. You're just bored, right? I might try it out. If they were like, do an hour in the hole, I would do an hour.
Which one of us would last the longest in the hole?
Not you. I've seen you go into what are those chambers called? The psychomanthium chambers or whatever? At the Houghton Mansion, you came out crying 5 minutes later. Like,
I never cried.
You were full of tears, and you peed a little. We all know this. This is common knowledge.
We also know how you get when the temperature in your house gets above 60 degrees.
Oh, so that would be the problem.
Runs AC year round. You're going to talk about you can last in the hole.
Dude, it was 60 degrees out today, and I thought it was 130 degrees outside.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be my problem. That would be the bigger problem for me.
Brennan brings up a good point, was that he may have been found dead without a head, and clearly he starved to death. This is common knowledge. But the prison wouldn't have said that he starved to death, because that would mean that it was them neglecting to feed him. They would have said that he probably had a heart attack and then starved to death and his head fell off. These are the ways.
If you're wondering what we're talking about, go listen to what was it called, Dave? What did you call that episode?
The Valley of the Headless Men.
Go listen to the side content, Valley of the Headless Man. Very interesting story.
Yeah, off the wall.
Yep. That was a wacky one. But yeah, you've had to continue down the demonic path. I mean, like I said, a lot of people have gotten scratched, and then staff is warning people like, hey, listen, like there may be some playful spirits here, but these have also been known to follow you home. So I would be interested in hearing more stories from people that got followed home by something evil and seeing what has happened. But you have other signs of it as well. Like people are hearing these low growls up into a point where they think that there's an animal in there, and they hear these growls inside the prison. It's just all signs are pointing to there could be something demonic or very evil at this prison. So it's not all turkey peats and, little girls haunting at the automobile museum or whatever. It's there's definitely something evil here as well. So approach with caution if you're going to investigate this place, for sure.
Which we have to. We need to get up to Montana.
Put it on the list.
Put it on the list of. Well, it was on Jesse's very short list of 500 places. So.
Yeah, Papa Squatch has a count going. I believe we're up to 389. I don't know if I never got so high, but it's up there. But
I think there's been one place you were like, I don't want to go there.
Which one was that? I was just trying to remember what that was.
I don't know. His own computer, probably.
Probably one of the Dakotas.
Probably one of the Dakotas.
I don't remember. I do remember mentioning like, this one's not on the list. I don't really remember why, but you got to leave at least one location off the list. That's exactly how it goes. But there were the two main riots. We discussed the 1959 one. There was also the one in the earlier 1900s, and in both of these, I believe they killed the deputy warden. Yeah, like that's really unfortunate for both those guys. One was shot, and the other one got his throat slit, which is brutal. The other one that died, I believe in 1959, it was Ted, I believe it's pronounced Rothy, according to a YouTube comment I read earlier. But that's just absolutely tragic. And it's brutal, man. It's a tough job.
It'd be hard to fill that position after the second one gets murdered, right?
Right, yeah. So
it's Warden, you do it. You do it. I'll be Warden.
I'm going to be deputy to the warden, not the deputy warden. I don't want that official title, but that's tragic. So that was short enough ago where he still has family members out there and everything. So that's just a tragic story for sure. But that's brutal. And that's prison life, man. That's the riots and everything. And it seems like a very spooky location.
You said that so matter of fact. That's just prison life, man. Like you spent half your you spent half your life in jail.
You guys wouldn't understand. It's just
you would know it's prison life stuff.
It's tough. I've done a total of I think 6 hours in lockup. So I know what it's like.
That's jail, not prison.
Right. I said lockup. They did lock it up. They locked the doors. I know. We checked. Couldn't open them. So.
That one guy was trying to open the door down the.
There was a man actively trying to, but he tried to do we tell a story? I don't think we did, because I think we tried to pretend it didn't happen, right? But while we were in lockup, there was a man who actively attempted to, after freaking out for like 3 hours straight, he actively attempted to orchestrate a breakout. He's like, hey guys, we're like, what? Because we're all in separate cells, so none of us can really see each other. I can only see Dave, who's across. He just goes, we're going to break out. We're like, what's your fucking plan, dude? Like, this isn't.
His plan was actually just to scream and kick the cell door until he got maced by the guards.
Which they did so many times.
We found out in court the next day that he was in prison because he got arrested for dragging a keg down the street for 3rd of July.
Right. Which is only slightly more ridiculous than what we were doing on 3rd of July, which was just actively openly drinking underage,
like 19, 20. Yeah.
It was nothing serious, folks. Everyone calm down. Okay. Stop Googling it. It's, the case got dismissed the next day. They just wanted to teach us stupid whippersnappers a little lesson there. But yeah, that was the prison break. Like, what do you have you been removing bricks? Have you been digging into the wall there?
He's just with a spoon.
Yeah.
Trying to tunnel his way out.
This modern prison cell wasn't anything like that.
Oh man.
Yikes.
And it's just that one of those ones where if he did get out there, just like, fine, whatever, just leave. Just get out of here.
Oh, dude, he was a pain. And the worst was we were in there with our buddy Alan, who's a stand-up comedian. And he wasn't a stand-up comedian yet, but he was still hilarious. And just every time it would quiet down, Alan would just get him going. And I can't repeat any of the jokes that he said on this stream, but it was something, man. Yeah, that was a night. So now you all know about our criminal past. But
oh my God, I forgot about that.
so yeah, I do know a thing or two.
I do know
lockup.
prison life.
We weren't even there long enough for them to give us anything to eat. Like, that's how brief it was. I didn't even get a phone call. Isn't that like the first thing you're supposed to get there? I wasn't even calling.
I think you have to ask for it.
Do you?
Yeah,
I wasn't even there long enough.
They just like bring you a platter with an old phone, being like, "Here's your phone call, sir." If you ask for it, they can't deny it.
No, they didn't want to do it because they knew that was Mendez's plan to get out. It was during the phone call. He was going to reach through, grab the phone, choke the guard, get his keys. Mendez. It's all starting to add up. Okay.
Did you guys run home afterwards after you were released?
No, my parents picked us up very angrily after they called
What was
every
funny is
hospital and police station in the state.
Ma was so mad at me and not you.
What was
That's
your
how
fault?
that went. It was sure I corrupted you.
This is
can
the
do
prison
no wrong.
life. This is the prison life, guys. Most of you wouldn't understand.
You just wouldn't know. You don't understand prison life.
Yeah.
But could have been worse. Could have been in Batman underpants or whatever Rob was arrested in, right? Come on. Look at us. Welcome back to Felon Talk here on Hometown Ghost Stories. Listen to these criminals talk about their lives in jail. So
we'll tell my story some other time. We don't need to get into it.
I think we did, didn't we? Yeah, it's all right.
We've definitely told your story before.
Yeah. So there's definitely more here. I'm going to say that this is in my top 10. So I think this is actually something that we're probably going to try to plan out, is either go to this one or I think Brushy Mountain and try to do an actual prison here. I'm going to actively pursue this. So we'll kind of leave some meat on the bone if we do end up doing a part 2 of this prison, which would be a live investigation episode. But because it is actively hosting paranormal tours and it seems like something that we could easily book, I think that this one kind of skyrockets up the list because I just want to go back, and just relive my days.
I was going to say it's going to be hard to sneak beers into the prison. We'll have to find whatever prison Mendez is locked up and hope that he found a...
Yeah, hope that he comes rolling up with a keg down the street. It's going to be perfect. Perfect. Awesome. Beautiful. All right, so I think that's all we'll touch on this one, but very cool location. Looks amazing. It looks like they've done a nice job keeping it up. There's museums and everything that you can still visit there. You can book it for a paranormal tour if you choose to do so, and I plan to do so. That's my plan.
Yes. Do you want to jump into some 5-star reviews then?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
All right. First one is from Don Old Marine. These are the Apple podcast ones, and then we're going to get some Spotify ones as well. But this one's from Don, titled Review. And it says, "This is really quite well done, and I enjoy all 3 guys. I just came across these gentlemen from another podcast and looked up their show. Working my way through past shows, very good." So thank you, Don, for that 5-star review. This one is from KT Grizzle. It's actually an update titled Ghost Stories Without the Bore and Gore. And she wrote, "Updating this review after 2 years of listening to every single episode, even movie reviews." And she says that because she's only seen 2 of the movies that we've covered. So even though she's only watched 2 movies, she's still listening to the reviews. And she wrote, "The guys consistently produce superb content. I especially like when you do investigations because I'm an investigator and hope you can come to Kansas sometime soon. You are all my favorites."
Thank you.
So
great reviews. Thank you for that. We appreciate that. If you haven't already, drop a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Apple Podcasts will read it right on the show. And Spotify, we will as well. We have a few of those. This one is from Flicka B. Flea. It says, listening for the first time I love the commentary with you guys and the content. So thank you and welcome in. You got some catching up to do. So enjoy the rest as you power through more episodes. Hopefully you do. The next one's from Ava. Says, love it so much. It's so much better than all of the other ghost stories I hear. So appreciate that. That's awesome. And Eric Box says, great show. Guys are funny. Listen to every episode. One of my favorite podcasts. Number 1, podcast 83 weeks. Your number 2, still 5 stars. So
listen, Eric, you tell Conrad Thompson, you tell Eric Bischoff that we're coming for that number 1 spot. Before 83 weeks is up, we are going to be your number 1 podcast. And there's nothing they can do. That's the bottom line, because Stone Cold Rob said so.
You heard it here first.
Thanks for clearing that up. I had no idea what that podcast was.
Yeah, I was wondering if they were listening to our podcast for 83 weeks. I'm like, well, you're taking your time.
Got some time to catch up.
But that's good. So thank you for those. Let's also thank our patrons real quick for the VIPs. We have Dave D, Kate, and Steve M, who this episode once again is dedicated to. Thank you guys so much for being members of Patreon and members of the VIP. We also have Blazora, Glitter Tees, Cami from Washington, Siobhan, Not Sharon, Kelly C, Dakota G, Nick, Donnie N, Inspires Gaming, Allison V, Robert H. My name is Turkey Pete. I'm king of the turkey meat. I like that, Anna. Nicely done. J9, Mallory K, Mom and Pops W, Lisa J, and please buy my stuff on Etsy. Miss J Craft's Boutique. And I'll give you a pass because you're a VIP patron, but let's try to not shamelessly plug our things here. But I'm actually going to check it out. I'm going to check it out and see what you got. So let's go into the next tier here, the Warrens Wards. We have Rachel G, too many Rachel B's. We have Her Lady Spookship of Spookshire, very fancy. Great. Nefarious Chad Poles, Wahidi Pirate, I Hate Rob, Julie Gooley, Eugene M, Arcade Hunters, Kath Q, Liz Young, DC, Chris Connolly, LBPS founder, next HTGS guest, the other Rachel B, Sarah Cook, Ambi Rose, Janice G, Jesse's allegedly discovered bone fragments, Lily, Jake, I'm sorry, where I said Jake, Rachel B, Turkey Pete only murders out of love. That is absolutely right, Matthew Thomas. Thank you so much. We have Sydney is no longer the favorite fan. And Sydney, I will let you know that you're still our favorite fan, no matter what you change your Patreon name to, unless your name is Papa Squatch, who is actually our favorite Patreon and our favorite fan. And Sydney, this is tough. Don't make me pick. All right, we got a lot of people.
No one's making you pick.
No one's making you pick anybody. What
Papa Squatch threatened my life. And he said, if you don't say this, I will kill you. And he's like, then I'm taking you back to prison. Back to lockup. I'm sorry. We have a finger is missing from my leather pouch, Steph A. We have Hookah Naka Laka, Haka Naka, Hika Laka, Hookah Naka Faka. Seth, I'm begging you. Can we switch it up? I'm having a hard time saying that. We have Loving It as well. Thank you so much for being members of the Warrens Wards. Next up, we're going to jump into the Ghost Pirate Mafia. And let's kick it off with, hey, Siri. She's listening every single time she listens. Set a reminder on Rob's calendar that he's my favorite and Dave is not. We have Bree, not Brianna, Chris, Miss Macabre, the headless man who allegedly died of starvation, Michelle, Team Rob with a heart. We don't condone this activity.
Love it.
Yep. We have Naroku. We have Cold Warrior, Joey B. I told myself to stop changing names, but I had to do this. So, hey Siri, search for banana ketchup near me. Dude, anybody else when you're in yes, I listen back to our episodes when I'm in the car and I'm reading, and when my phone is playing the audio, it pulls up Siri. And like, hey, what was that? What do you need? You want me to search for Rob's nipples?
I shut Siri off. The voice command is not.
Same thing. And the main thing is, like, my son's name is Sammy. So I was like, whenever I'm like, hey, Sammy, my phone chimes up. It's like, what? You wanted me? I'm like, no, it's not to you. You're not part of this family as much as you try to be.
Mine used to answer me when I'd say, like, seriously and stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't like it. Anyways, D from H-Town. Meta is Sarah B, Dominica, Queen Chan's Revenge. I think I'm getting worse at saying that.
You are. You're regressing.
I get a little more zesty every time
You're
I say
unhatching.
it. Yeah. I'm unhatching. Angel prefers Dave, then Jesse, and Rob this time. Very good. We're liking the way this list is changing. Monster Mom 04, Shannon K, Allie, Dark Snark. I hear Rob uses a jerk-up machine whenever he gets lonely.
It's true.
He's still figuring it out. That's why he's still alive. We have Megan S, also Morgan S. Rob's missing neck. Sharon V, Wayne C. Mrs. Puggy Wuggy has a square cat punt. Hashtag Team Jesse. Thank you for being on Team Jesse. Crystal Quinn, Aaron A. Colby, the newly named serial killer, narrowly escaped captivity in Montana. Well, I'm glad you made it out of there. Rob Coakley's allegedly poorly ketchup jizz. I keep doing this without the disclaimer. Second disclaimer. Block your kids' ears. Rob Coakley's allegedly poorly ketchup jizz bukkakied French fry jerk up party. So they updated it. More vulgar than last time. Love it. Thank you so much. Alicia E. We have Thick Boy Freddy allegedly watching Rob finish his story against MMA Dave in a Boston Beantown beatdown match using the jerk up method.
Oh no.
How do you read a full paragraph, but you can't say one word?
Yeah, that I mess up my own last name. I'll never live that down.
One syllable.
Yep. Swanee. Turkey Pete was framed by the Gobbler for trademark infringement.
It's true.
Sam from Nepal, Joe R, Paul from St. Louis, Al Capone, I should be in every episode. Huggy Bear went to Disney World and wore my HTGS shirt on the Haunted Mansion. Thanks, Rob.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Goated ride right there. Solar Flare, Mariah M, Kira Lee J, Anthony. Spiritually, I identify as Rachel B. T. That's another Rachel B added to the list. Perfect. The next one is the final boss is The Undertaker. Spoiler alert. Brandon W, his hoop ship and her Soph ship. Do you like that? And then finally, we're going to wrap it up with Let's Eat Fingers in the Hot Tube Tonight.
That's how you always wrap a party up.
That's how you eat fingers. That's how we do it. Anyways, I think that'll pretty much do it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much to the patrons. It's always an absolute joy reading out your names on this show. $3 a month will get you on Patreon. It'll get you bonus episodes, exclusive content. The higher you go in the tiers, the more stuff you get. And then if you get into the VIPs, you can have an episode dedicated to you. Once again, shout out to Kate and Steve M. Thank you so much for being VIPs. And I think that'll pretty much do it. Friday, we are dropping what?
Paranormal update.
Yeah, Friday's the paranormal update. Some good ones in there. And then next week, we're doing a movie review where we've watched some really good movies lately. So we had to reach into the bag of bad, and we're watching House of the Dead from 2003.
I'm just going to go on a limb and say that we didn't have to do that, but we did.
We had to do it.
We did, didn't we?
And we'll be in Key West on next Tuesday.
Hell yeah. So another live episode. We'll be back next week with a new one. So make sure you stay tuned. Drop us some reviews, and we'll catch you guys next time for another brand new episode of Hometown Ghost Stories. Love you all. Thank you. Bye.